My name is Stefania with the Video Allies. Today we're going to be talking about what is a producer and why you need one, especially the differences between a producer and a videographer.
So today you have the trifecta of producers, videographers, filmmakers, editors, everything. We do literally all of it. So today we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about what a producer is, so you have a better understanding of, when you're going to hire somebody, do you need a producer or just a videographer?
I think there's a lot of confusion on that point. I need video, so do I get a videographer that has video in the name, right? And so today we're going to go through all those things and make sure that you know exactly what you need at the end of this video.
So we kind of all come from different backgrounds, so let's kind of go through a little bit about the different types of producers that there are. Maybe you can talk a little bit, actually let's start with you. Talk a little bit about your experience as a producer and what it means.
Yeah, so my background is in movies, TV shows, cinema, and a lot of what I've done has been working on large productions, which means sometimes you've got 50, 75 crew members. In a scenario like that, the producer is often working with a script and they find talent, they find a director, they'll get names attached to the movie so it sells at the theaters. Producing in the cinema world is a lot of phone calls and managing headaches and helping make sure all of the department heads have the gear rentals they need and putting out fires and hiring all the many crew members for each individual type of job. So producing in cinema is a huge role. So it's really great to have that background and that understanding of the mass scale producing and then shrink it down when it comes to YouTube and working with an entrepreneur. Ultimately, in all forms of producing, the main goal is identifying the story or the message and making sure you have all the tools necessary to tell that story, speak that message, and get that conveyed to the viewer.
So you can really scale it, right? So coming from film where you're going to have this big, huge crew to, like some of the commercials that you've worked on. Maybe talk a little bit about how you scale that down and what the role would be there.
Right. Well, in comparison to cinema, where you're really like a general of an army, and in many cases the producer is just overseeing everything, when you bring it down to a commercial level, now you're usually working with a client. You're helping a specific business or entity to get their message out, to be known, and to, in some ways, make a star out of that business or that person. So in film, we are telling a story, narrative story. In commercials, we could be showing a beautiful narrative story that then leads you to, by the way, buy this product. And I would say the difference in working is just, again, you're scaling down a little bit. We've done several projects. We've also done music videos as a team. We've had a lot of fun with those. And essentially, as producer, your job is to find out from the client what they need, and then you start to dissipate all the orders, just like a general, again, where you would say, okay, this is the size and scope of this project. This is our budget. We work backwards from the budget so we know what we're working with, and then how many people and what kind of skills we need, where we're going to film it, all of those things. So a smaller version than a movie in most cases because you're filming less time. But the truth is, I feel like it's the same amount of work because you still have to assemble all the same things. And the smaller your team gets, the more hats I have to wear as a producer. So it's not simpler just because it's smaller. And the dedication has to be the same, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if you take it down to like the YouTube scale, right, the producer basically just has that overall vision. So if you're looking at it and you're saying, do I need to hire a producer or do I need to hire a videographer? A videographer, they're two completely different jobs, right? And there's nothing wrong, like one is not better than the other. They're just two completely separate things. We've been kind of talking about that. When it comes to YouTube, for example, you want to have somebody that has sort of the overall vision, right? If you're starting your own channel, whether you'll become your own executive producer or not, you want to have somebody that knows from start to finish exactly what's going to happen from, you know, pre-production all the way to posting.
Yeah, you've got to have those people. Often you need more than one. We hire only producers because we feel like we like to work with a small, tight team where everybody knows what's expected, and there isn't anyone who's like, what do I do next? We don't have that on our crew.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows what needs to happen the whole time, and that way we can actually do more with a smaller crew. And it's been really efficient. So
I feel like there are some business owners who do a good job of wearing their own producer hat. And for people like that who know the vision of what they're after and they really want to control that vision, for somebody like that, hiring a videographer is great because you just need somebody to capture what you've already planned for yourself. Sometimes you want somebody to kind of carry a little bit of that load for you. So if you need help with like sculpting the vision or the story, or also just like understanding the way that you are being seen, sometimes we need an external person to be a mirror for us. We think we're going to come across one way, but then you watch your videos back and you're like, crap, I look like a jerk. Or like you figure out that the message isn't being conveyed. So that's where a really good producer comes in, who can look at the story, look at the message, remembering that ultimately the goal of any content that we're creating is emotional impact. The purpose of creating content or making videos or whatever it is you want to reach people. You want to touch hearts. You want to create an emotional impact. You want to have influence. And with all of those things, sometimes it can be really helpful to have a producer to help you see what you need to do a little better, or to shape that vision in a way that's actually going to land the message.
Well, and the producer is really your first audience. So even for us as producers, you know, doing our channel, we don't like to generally produce our own stuff. Like even like she said, if you have that vision, that's great. However, it's so difficult when you're on camera to be trying to convey the right message and be thinking if everything is going exactly how it needs to go and you said all the right things and you didn't make a mistake. So it's so nice to have somebody, you know, behind that camera that's listening to that overall message. You know, like we kind of have to think in like, I just need to say this thing, and then once I get through that, now I can go to the next thing. So it can be really disjointed if you don't have somebody sort of listening to that entire message and going, hold up, that didn't make sense. Maybe say it this way, or like, where are you going with that? That didn't really connect or land as the audience.
Yeah. That's kind of why we got the name Video Allies, because it's a partnership with the client as a producer. It's being that ally that somebody needs to make sure that they're being heard, they're being seen, or they don't keep scratching their head between takes, or all of the silly, weird things that we do that we might not even realize that we're doing.
yeah, it's like we were talking about it today. As good as I am behind the camera producing someone else, it's really hard to produce for myself. You mentioned clients often, they have their whole vision in mind and they invite a videographer to come and film. That means that every detail needs to be ready beforehand, because once you get on camera, you can't manage stuff behind the camera now. And so the videographer we were talking about, it's kind of like it's sort of a mindset. And granted, there aren't videographers and other people who are directors and producers. It's sort of you're hired to do a certain task on that project. Mm-hmm. Because I've been hired to do videography for an event, a wedding, things like that, where I'm just capturing what's going on around me. Someone else was in charge of organizing the event. All I have to do is make it look good.
It's kind of documentary style almost.
Very much.
Mm-hmm. Versus working with a producer, producers tend to curate the message a little bit better, make sure the colors are working for emotional impact, and make sure there's nothing distracting and all of that stuff. It is a little bit more cinematic or stylized, or just really
telling
catered.
a story.
Yeah, it's custom to your business versus just like, well, here we are. This is what you see is what you get.
Yeah, let me just film you and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like I come from the world of television, creating commercials, promotions, and we had videographers, the camera guys, and then we had the producers. And when we'd show up on set, if I was a producer, you know, and I would say like, what do you think to the cameraman or something, he'd be like, that's not my job. I'm not here to produce, I'm here to capture your vision. And so a lot of times, you know, I don't know, it might sound like, oh, like, well, I'm a producer, not, you know, not a videographer, I do both, whatever. It's not really like that. It's just that there's like specific tasks and jobs, and there's certain people that they're literally there just to capture. They don't want to do that part of it, right? Like there's a certain personality type that you have to be a producer, somebody who wants to listen to that message and, like you said, be the mirror.
And take the hit when something, you know, when
True.
someone needs to be accountable. Producer's accountable. And, you know, when I say videographer role versus producer role, in many cases on set, especially those big movies we're talking about, you're not supposed to step outside your bounds. And so that's why you want to make sure when you're hiring for what you want, if you know exactly what you want, you just want someone behind the camera who's really good at capturing things and you're the director, great. If you want someone who's going to take all these other burdens off your shoulders, that's when you want a producer. And so as not to confuse things, producer, director, people behind the camera, they all have a distinctive role. And as I said, in many cases, it's not appropriate for a camera person to raise their hand and say, you made a mistake. And that's why you may not get someone who will readily do that. So just make sure you know what you need to hire. And if it is a commercial product, we have talked about directors in a case where it's something that needs an exclusive vision. The producers are there to put together the whole project, but then there will be likely one person chosen to direct the vision of that so it stays clear. With YouTube, we're able to have several producers, and we call ourselves Motormind because we think the same way, and it's made it really easy.
Yeah, you can kind of think about a videographer as being reactive and a producer as being proactive. So, you know, a videographer is just there to kind of capture what's going on, and a producer is there to plan the entire project. And for YouTube, that's, you know, kind of our main space. It's so nice to have an actual producer behind the camera that can sit and listen to what you have to say, make sure that you're conveying your message, because content is king, right? If you're not getting your message across, no one's going to watch your videos and it's not going to work out.
Yeah. In fact, I would say, what are your thoughts on this conversation? Producer, director, videographer. We'll just stop at those three roles because typically with YouTube, those are the three things that we need to do the most, although we handle audio and everything else. For you, what do you think you would be looking for? A producer? Would you just need a videographer because you've got everything else together? Does this terrify you? I'd love to hear what are your thoughts on these different roles. I hope we've clarified a little bit. Producers like the general in charge of the entire thing, and even when they're hired by a client, they are there to do what's best for the project and the client, which is tricky. Again, getting back to that courage to speak up and say, that's not working. Unfortunately, as a producer, sometimes you have to even be able to, in the best interest of your client, say, let's not do it this way, it's not working. Let's see if we can try this, and then in the end, what works best. Because we've tried that before, and even when the client was a little afraid, and they're like, that was better. You have to have that courage to be able to speak up and say, in the best interest of you and the project, let's try this.
Yeah, a great producer is very mindful of the client's dollar, you know, the budget and what's available and what's possible. A great producer is going to tell you no when something's not realistic, and a great producer is ultimately going to be your best friend on the project because they should be there for you. They're crunching numbers, they're problem solving, there's a lot of logistical elements, but I believe the best producers are people, and great producers know how to help another person really be their best self.
So let us know in the comments if you need a videographer or producer, and give us some discussion if you'd like to hear more about this topic. If you do need a producer or are interested in that, we have a free strategy call. Basically, you can talk to any one of our producers about your project and see where you need to go from here.
We are your video allies. You've got this, we've got your back, and we cannot wait to see what kind of content you create.